Hey everyone, so here's our second exciting data exercise video. And so we're going to kind of revisit what we're doing. I'm still working on testing the theoretical proposition that uh, there is that what drives the trade deficit is actually investment flows to the United States. And so in the previous iteration of this, I looked at some data and I had started by showing you data on trade, and I had looked at real, right? Real imports and imports, exports, that is in real dollars, which is inflation adjusted, right? And so, uh, in order to do what we want to do, that's not necessarily the best way to show you kind of a snapshot over time and get kind of that eyeball the data and see how trade went. That was fine. But for what I'm trying to do here, I really needed different data. So I've gone back in to Fred, and I've gotten in one graph, I looked up imports of goods and services, and then I just started adding stuff using the edit function, right? I just added line after line, right? And I said, give me another thing. And so now I've got 5 lines, right? I've got imports of goods and services, exports of goods and services. I've got foreign direct investment, rest of world foreign direct investment, which is something we looked at last time. And I've got a couple other things. I've got foreign debt held by, or excuse me, federal debt held by foreign and international investors, and a measure of the foreign assets in the U.S., the net capital flow. One of my favorites, BOPI. They stopped count. They stopped uh, doing that figure in 2014, so it kind of cuts off. But so now I've got 5 pieces of data, and it's kind of handy to get it all together because then you get one Excel sheet. When you download it, you get one Excel sheet. Okay, and so let's go to that Excel spreadsheet. Here we go. And on the README page, you also get this, right? Nice thing is we get the README page that says where it's from, and it tells you as much as Fred tells you about these things. Sometimes I wish they would explain better what these are, what's included and not included in here. You have to do some research and backtrack it. But I've got these pieces of data, and on the data page, now you're going to get this, okay? I'm going to make this available to you. Plus, it's going to have, well, it's going to be this, it's going to have the regression results so you can look at them and try to reproduce them. But if you recall, what I did is on the data page, I've had to take, because I have imports and exports of goods and services, I had to define a column that's defined as imports minus exports to give us the trade deficit. And that is filled all the way down. And here we have row FDI, rest of the world FDI. We have foreign debt held by foreign individuals, and we have balance of payments of investments, right? So we have row FDI, FDI, FBIN, BOPI. Now, we would probably, in writing a paper, want to give it a better abbreviation or label. What we call the label we put on a, a variable. Well, we call it the label, and we would probably want to put better labels than this. But since these correlate, like you can go and look these up in Fred, that we want to keep them here. All right, so here's the data I've got. Now, let's just go and run our data analysis. So we pull up regression, and I've already walked myself through it. So it's going to come up as regression. And we're going to have to say, all right, what's our dependent variable? Our dependent variable is trade deficit. And so we'll do our little thing here, run down. And then we are going to say, for the first thing, let's just look at, kind of recreate the row FDI, right? What's the relationship here? Because we do have, instead of doing, there we go, instead of doing 2017 dollars, these are nominal dollars, then dollars. right? And everything here is in some multiple of dollars. Most of them are billions. The foreign debt for some is millions. I don't know why, but so here we go. What we got here is the foreign direct investment, and I'm going to use my original things here. Create a ply sheet. I've got labels. I've got the line fit plots, which are going to show us a pretty little picture, and bam. And if you're all right, so we've sort of been here before, but like I say, we have slightly different data. So let's see if anything changed. When we look at this again, our coefficient, right? This is the coefficient that we find. The t-stat, standard error t-stat, yeah, we're not so concerned. P-value, yes, we have so our independent variable, when we look at this line, we see the coefficient, is it positive, right? Okay. And meaning that as foreign direct investment goes up, trade deficit goes up. The p-value tells us it's way small, so it is significant. Our r squared is 47, right? Which I think was a little less than the last time. But we're explaining 40% of the variation in the model. So that's our first little thing here. Now, to move into something different, I've got other data. I said, hey, look, I know that foreign direct investment isn't all the investment from foreigners in the US. A lot of it is foreign debt. We have a huge not trade deficit, we have a huge government debt. And a lot of that is held by foreign folks. And so what are we looking at here, right? What have we got? So that should have an impact as well. So what we want to do is see the effect of both of these things, right? And so we're going to do a multivariate regression. Really simple to do, though. We go in, do data into data analysis, hit regression. Now, I have all the stuff I had before, right? So the input range hasn't changed. What's going to change, the input range for y, the dependent variable, is not changing, but the independent variables are going to change. And it's just so difficult. I just have to highlight both of them, right? So now I want to see, hey, what's the effect of foreign direct investment and at the same time foreign debt, right? And I just have to highlight both of them. I go back in, right? Do my numbers line up? Yep. 1 to 218, 1 to 218. I got column F and G. I got F and G. And let me go down here and add in, and I'm going to call it debt, right? Because I want a shorter label. I'm going to keeping track of my plies. I want to keep track of my worksheet plies. And so foreign debt and reg is regression result. That's what I've got there. So bam, let's not waste any time. Let's click that puppy. Computers are fast, right? Okay, what do we got here? And
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
I renamed Alexa to a different wake word like in Star Trek, and you should hear her when we are actually watching Star Trek. Okay, what do we got going on? Very frequently, when you come to these results, we want to hunt out our coefficients, right? So here are our coefficients. Do we have, this is a question of the size of these numbers, right? And so the strength is, this one's really low because I think rho FDI is actually millions of dollars, and we're talking about billions and everything else. So yeah, the coefficient has a couple extra zeros in there we could have changed the FDI to billions by dividing, but I didn't bother. The key thing is our p-values, right? What do we got for p-values? And our p-values continue to be really low. This is the probability that this correlation here, as that we have the strength and direction in our coefficients. The p-value is the chance that these would be the result of randomness, right? And right. So this is the odds that we would have to we could not reject the null hypothesis, and they're very low, right? The odds that we see here are very low, so we can reject null hypotheses in this case. So we have support for these variables. Let's look at our R squareds here. Now remember, R squared is the amount of variation in the dependent variable that is explained by having this data in here, right? And so you're comparing, hey, what if we guessed, if we had no information about the trade deficit, we would just take the average. We would just figure out what the average is, and that would be your best guess as to what it was on any given in any given observation. However, when we have this formula, right, with the coefficient, we have these two pieces of data, right? We have the FDI, and we have the foreign debt. These coefficients allow us to predict on a line, right? Remember, there's the line that's fit there, right? We make this prediction, and the difference between the line and this is how much we're off. The question is, when we add up how much we're off in here, how does that vary? How does that compare to if we had just, how much it would be off if we were comparing to a horizontal line, right? Which is what you would be doing if you had just the average. So, okay, R squared is goodness of fit. How much of the variation in the dependent variable can be explained has been explained by this model, by this regression, and here we're finding 70%. Right now, I mentioned an adjusted R square. When we add variables in, even if the variables are bullshit, adding in extra variables will get a better fit to the data, and so adjusted R squared takes into account how many variables, and it lets you compare models with different numbers of variables. So if we wanted to say, hey, how is this doing compared to our previous one, we're going to want to look at adjusted R squared. And so here it's 0.69, and here it's 0.46. So we went from explaining, by this 46%, in comparison, we've gone to 69. So we've actually really improved, right? The model on its own just says, hey, 70, we're explaining 70% of the variation. That's not bad. Now, I still am a little wigged out that we have these big intercepts, right? What do we put? What impression do what's the significance of an intercept? Well, that's the prediction the model makes if everything was zero. So if there was a neutral, right, because the FDI can go positive or negative, that would be there. With foreign debt held, the foreign debt held by foreign individuals, or federal debt held by foreign individuals, that's never zero, right? That's an absolute number. It gets bigger, and so for each increase of 1 billion in the foreign debt held by foreigners, we're getting the coefficient tells us we'd get an increase of 0.07, a 7%. So it's interesting. There's not a 1-to-1, right? Not even close, but we are seeing a relationship, and it is positive, right? When more people overseas hold money, our trade deficit gets bigger, right? The thing is, though, we don't have a perfect correlation, and we have this intercept, and you could interpret the intercept as being kind of the natural state. Without, when all this stuff is zero, this is what our trade deficit would be, and it would be, I would be happier if it was closer to zero. Is my point. But we don't really have a good model. This is a crappy model, and we're just looking at a couple variables. So here we go, and this is a multiple. Here's a multiple regression. So we got our coefficients, got our standard errors, which are reported in tables. When you report stuff, you report the coefficient in a table. You put the standard error in parentheses underneath it, and then you put asterisks to indicate whether the coefficient is significant or not, and at what level it's significant. And these are really small numbers. I don't even know what they are. I don't need to know. I just need to know they are less than 0.001. So they get 2 asterisks, right? And that's what's reported. We also are going to report our number of observations, right? N equals that. And you generally report an R squared. If I was reporting this regression alone, I would report the R square. If I have a table showing several regressions, I would have an adjusted R square, and I would report that. So that's what we've got here, and these are outcomes. Now, 15 minutes in, I know it's hard. What I want you to do for the quiz, right? What I want you to do for the quiz, you're going to have this, right? So you've got these results. What I want you to do, remember we got BOPI, the balance of payments. In theory, this should be a better measure, right? Because this is supposed to be all the balance here. And so what I want you to do is run a regression on, get this data, run the regression, BOPI on trade deficit, right? And balance of payments on investments, regress that on the trade deficit. Little warning: when you're setting up your stuff, when you're putting your input ranges, it stops here, right? It stops in 2014 at 175. So you're going to have to, when you do your data analysis, I'll even show you. You're going to go and you're going to have to do your Y range just down to 175. Ready? Right? Match that. And having left that highlighted kind of helps. And then get your BOPI. I like BOPI. I just like you. I like saying it. I think BOP means something on the internet though, so I don't know. And give it a label, and hit. That's all you got to do, right? I'm sorry, it's not hard. It's not particularly difficult. But then I want you to get the results, and then I want you to look at them. And I'm going to have a quiz that's going to ask you questions first about the results, the FDI results. Here, let me cancel out of that. Yes, I don't need to do you. I'm going to ask about these things here, and then I'm going to ask you what you got in doing BOPI, and probably I'm also going to ask you to do a multiple regression, right, of the foreign debt and the BOPI, right? Because I know row FDI, that should be included in balance of payments. I'm not 100% sure that the Fed data for BOPI includes foreign debt. So we have to put an asterisk next to these results that they might not be valid if we're double counting. But I want to see, what happens when we have a different multiple regression, and what our results would look like. And again, it's real easy, right? When you do the first one, when you do the BOPI one, you just need to change. Actually, I can just go here and make it 175. I can just put these things in. You can type them in if you're bored. So I know it goes to 175 because we were just doing it. And what do I want? I want G and H to do foreign debt and BOPI, right? And then I would just change the label here. You get the idea, right? That's all you got to do. Long pole in the tent is getting the data, making sure you got Excel, downloading the data that I'm going to make available on Canvas, and then making sure your stat pack is enabled. And then you're going to run these regressions and look at the results and try to interpret them the way I have. You're looking at your coefficients. You're looking at direction, right? We're pretty much always finding a positive relationship, which is in the predicted direction. And look at your p-values, right? What are the odds? What are the odds that this could just be randomness? And when they're very low, then we reject anytime they're less than 0.05. The standard is we reject the null hypothesis and say there might be something going on here. That's how we do things. And then the big thing is the interpretation. Hey, from what you're seeing, does, how are you feeling about that theoretical proposition, right? Everything we're doing is basically testing this out. We are finding support. So we are getting, I think we're getting basically positive results in terms of confirming. We're not getting disconfirming results at this point. Still not perfect though. So there you go. That's what I want you to do. Hope this all makes sense. I'm sorry to give you 20 minutes of looking at Excel, but what can you do?